Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Ryan Heckman, the CEO of Rallyday Partners, and this is the Founders Journey podcast. We'll explore the heart and soul of great founders and their journey to build the company of their dreams. You will learn about new industries and business models while discovering how to apply the founder's mindset to your everyday work and life. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Founders Journey podcast. This is sort of a special series where we're interviewing investment bankers that are within the sectors where Rallyday invests. I suppose in part the hope is that we can, demystify investment banking a little bit and also get the perspective of these professionals who are out there in the marketplace and bring that capital markets perspective to founders and companies alike, so that maybe they can get a perspective about their world that they operate in from a different viewpoint than they typically do. So I have the distinct pleasure today of welcoming Garth Martin. Garth works at an investment bank called Envoy. We'll talk a bit about that more, but Envoy is sort of known for a particular focus on professional services, and Garth is like total rock star, really kind, genuine. A lot of words that you normally wouldn't associate with an investment banker. That is Garth. So with that, welcome, Garth. I'm so psyched that you're here and we're giving this opportunity to our community. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me, and appreciate the kind words. Hopefully others think that as well, but no, it's I'm super excited to dive in.
I was thinking I ride my bike to work in the summer, but I was thinking about on my commute this morning. It's a 7-minute commute, so don't let it fool you. I was thinking about this silly show that I started watching last week called Industry, which I was told it was like Succession, and I wouldn't say it's quite as good. And it was super crazy stories about investment bankers, and I'm not sure they quite got it right. Have you seen that show, Garth?
No, I actually haven't.
Okay, well,
I need to look it up after this.
It's pretty interesting. It's on HBO and it's a little crazy, but I find it far afield of middle market investment banking, but whatever. I do think there is an interest in the world to better understand this world where you live, Garth. But anyway, let's get to your personal story, if that's okay. Tell us how you grew up and how you got into banking, maybe some of your early influences, whether they be mentors or professors or whatever. But tell us how this all started, Garth.
Yeah, happy to do it. So just if I kind of go back to personal background. So, I think this is a big piece of my story, but grew up in a small town, grew up in Pennsylvania, outside of about an hour and a half west of Philadelphia. Very small town. Was actually the first person in my family to go to college. So that was kind of fun, but I think there's a lot of bankers and people in private equity that, come from people in finance and from finance families. Like I had really no concept, if, even when I was in college, I had no clue what mid-market M&A, mid-market investment banking looked like. So grew up in a small town. My parents actually owned a small business. So grew up kind of in the business world to an extent. And, growing up, they had worked with a lot of accountants and lawyers. And so I wanted to pursue college and wanted to kind of build a career. And I chose the accounting route through college, through my undergrad program. And so, again, didn't really have a ton of context on mid-market investment banking, but went in, actually I'm a CPA by background. So went to a very small university in Pennsylvania and started kind of learning about accounting and things like that, and felt like that was a good path to really understand business at kind of a foundational layer and to start my career.
Did you actually get your CPA?
Yeah, so I'm a CPA by background. So went through the CPA exams, which was not a fun process at all, but did all of that, and then now have all of my investment banking licensing and things with FINRA. So I've done kind of 2 rounds of tests. I only use kind of one set of tests, but so did that. It wasn't until I had actually taken on an internship that I really started to learn about the investment banking space. Always thought I'd end up in the Northeast. Ended up, my wife, but girlfriend at the time, had moved to Charlotte. And so got to meet a small boutique investment bank in Charlotte. And that was kind of my first, entry into investment banking. And when I took that internship, I felt like I was super far behind. There was other people in the internship program that really, they were doing all of the Wall Street prep things. They were, learning Excel modeling. They had, gone to specific business schools. So just, I felt like I was really far behind when I started. And I think it's really has kind of shaped a lot of our firm today, but also just my, a lot of things that make me passionate about the industry is, trying to create opportunities for, my younger self, and giving people an opportunity to step into this space. So, again, grew up outside of Philly, moved to Charlotte. I did work for 2 years in public accounting. So did that, worked primarily in financial due diligence. So that's if you are familiar with M&A, that's quality of earnings, and did that for 2 years, but just felt like I was missing a lot of the just investment rationale. It wasn't just focused on financial performance of a company. It was, hey, where are these companies going? What's happening in a certain market? Where, are people investing? What does the next 5 years look like? And so it was just a lot of like deal rationale that I felt like I was missing. And so ended up pursuing and going back into investment banking after a few years within public accounting. And so really have spent most of my career within the area that I cover today, which is broader technology services. That's kind of a quick snapshot.
Did you start Envoy, Garth?
Yeah, so I did. And again, back to just my own personal story. And, I glossed over this, but when I was in public accounting, I had pursued actually a number of different investment banks that were in Charlotte, some that were outside of Charlotte, and just kept getting kind of the same responses. Like I couldn't even really get interviews with a number of mid-market investment banks. I was a non-target school, went to a really small liberal arts college. I didn't even study finance in my undergrad. So that, didn't have any real investment banking experience, was an accounting background. So just, I was like this non-target, non-cookie cutter background. A lot of investment banks like bigger schools, Ivy League schools, they have kind of a target schools. And so interviewed, kept getting turned down, didn't even really get a ton of opportunities, got a couple of phone calls with different groups. And yeah, I think that we've tried to bake that into our organization. We have, if you look at a lot of our talent, a lot of us are non-target backgrounds and people that really wanted to build a career in the investment banking space and really just work hard, try to differentiate ourselves. But we started our group about 3 years ago, almost to this day. And we're really with the thesis of just building a great place where people can build careers in the investment banking space. And so how can we grow our junior talents' careers? How can we service clients really, really well? And how do we do that with a slightly different culture and environment and keep people over a long period of time that want to make the investment to stay in that space?
I mean, now it makes sense, right? I mean, you feel a lot of this history and lineage in the way you carry yourself and the feelings that you get when you're around you, kind of coming in through the back door, so to speak. And you were kind of like the Tom Brady, like I barely got drafted, kind of.
Yeah, the last pick in the draft.
Yeah, I can get that. I've wondered myself, given, a similar path into private equity, whether in the end it turns out to be my biggest strength, that I didn't come up through that way, but it wasn't obvious to me when I was trying to get in the door, it's just so hard. So I now that I'm so glad that I know this now. Tell me what your parents, do your parents know what you do? I guess they probably do actually, because they're small business owners. What do they think about what you've built, Garth?
Yeah, I think they're super proud and think it's really fun. I get to travel around. I've gotten to work on transactions across the globe. I've gotten to sell businesses out of Hungary and Mexico and Argentina and Canada and Poland and Ukraine. And so I think they love whenever I'm home for holidays and things like that, like love just hearing the stories and things like that. I think they have a decent understanding. I kind of describe it to them and to people outside of the space. There's a lot of bankers that wouldn't appreciate this analogy, but I describe it to them and to others it's pretty similar to like I'm like a real estate agent, but for businesses. It's a very simple description. There's a lot of different nuances, but I think that analogy is helpful for them to kind of wrap their heads around like where I can step in and try to help founders and business owners.
Well, you've done better than I have. My mom was a school teacher, and I mean, I've been doing this for 27 years. And when I hear her talk about me or introduce me or whatever, she gets to the dad part, which people understand. And then she says, I'm a business person. And that's not as far as we get. So I can empathize with that. Tell me, how many transactions do you guys do in a typical year?
Yeah, so our firm, we're still growing, adding to the team. In a 12-month period right now, we're probably somewhere between 10 to 15 transactions in an annual period. And I expect that to continue to grow as we're adding to different team members.
And is your typical client a founder enterprise, Garth, or is it owned by investors, or what is your kind of typical client?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do both sell side work and buy side work. People may hear that term. So we operate on both sides of the table through a transaction. Most of our work is going to be on the sell side. So probably 80% of our work is going to be on the sell side. And then it's a mix. It's a mix of founders, owner operators, and then also private equity or institutionally backed businesses. I would say, I think our differentiator and value prop to the market is really serving situations where a lot of times the founder is still pretty heavily involved. They may not be the majority shareholder of the business. They may own a portion of the business. It may be institutionally backed, but we like to say through, when we're talking to investors and operators and business owners, we want to be a part of transactions where like the blood, sweat, and tears of individuals that have built the business we're bringing that to fruition through a transaction. We want to step in and offer a very bespoke offering, do a lot of hand holding. We want it to be emotional, and these are hopefully life-changing events for a lot of our clients. And so that is just, it's such a fun, exciting transaction to be a part of. Then potentially, a much larger transaction where it is truly more of a transaction. We want to, help people think through just where is their company going? What could the next 5 years look like? How, a culmination of the last 5 to 10 years of really hard work coming together in this like really exciting transaction.
Yeah, we get that because we only invest in founders. And so like the spirituality of that is far different than, investing in a company that was owned by a bunch of professional investors previously. It is so different. And And it's both harder in some ways, I suppose, but more fulfilling.
Yeah.
At the same time. Does it help, Garth, that kind of you as the heartbeat of the organization, that you were at the kitchen table talking to your parents about their challenges as owners and just making payroll and all the crap? I mean, is that do you feel that coming out in the work that you do today with your team?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, growing up, both of my parents worked in the business. So there wasn't like a separation between, work and personal. It was kind of embedded within all things in life. So yeah, I think it brings like a different appreciation. I also got to work in that business. Their business was a flooring installation and retailer. And so I got to go out on installation jobs and work in the warehouse. And so just working inside of an organization, like you have a different level of appreciation for what the potential transaction could look like and the stewardship of that and, the people that it's impacting their lives. And so, trying to bring that mentality into every advisory engagement that we get to work on, the transaction can impact every single person involved, even if they're not, sitting at the table. And so just having the right mentality, not trying to force certain transactions upon our clients, just for the highest price or whatever it is. Like, and we talk a lot about this as well. It's not just an economic decision. It's a cultural decision. It's a legacy decision. Like there's a bunch of different facets that we can help our clients think through just the transaction.
Yeah. And what I think is so cool about you and the Envoy platform is just you've got that aggressive humility that we talk about a lot here at our firm, where there's just not many people in the world who are 10 out of 10 aggressive and 10 out of 10 humble, like you just think of your personal lives. And on the other side of that humility is, you're gonna go to the death for your clients. We that's evident in what we watch from the sidelines. Like you are very aggressive on behalf of your clients, but you're also you pack a punch far above your weight in terms of your industry expertise and just your command of what's going on, because you're so focused in one sector as opposed to being a generalist. I mean, like, why don't we talk, if it's okay with you, about some of the trends within tech services, maybe most particularly, just because that's where we spend a bunch of time, and this thing called AI, like what's going on. So, like, if you had to, and I think you just presented to our firm this morning, but if you had to say, like, here are the 3 to 5 big macro themes going on in tech services, what are those today?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, AI it's like you can't operate in a single day. You can't go an hour without talking about AI. It's pervasive across every single one of our clients, every single buyer conversation. So that just is at the forefront of the industry right now. I think there's a couple of different trends that I would call out. I would say just more at a macro level, a couple of things that we've taken note of. Just the state of the tools today within specifically within AI, they're progressing at a very, very fast rate. I think we are still very bullish on our sector, and these tools are a massive productivity increase to our clients, to their clients. We're seeing early, very positive signs of kind of penetration of the tools, use cases, things like that. I think something that we're paying a lot of attention to, again, this is more at a macro level, is just the change management of actually bringing these tools to life is still very tricky and challenging. And so, there's a number of our clients that are working on, like, how do you roll these tools out across an organization and get people to use it, not just today, but also over the next 2 to 3 years, so they can get the best return on their investment. And then one other piece at a macro level, just I would say, I think the market headwinds or tailwinds are multifaceted, and don't underappreciate that. I think right now in the headlines, AI is getting credit, good or bad, for a lot of things that I think there's just a lot of nuance to our markets. You had a ton of stimulus come in through 2020 through 2023. You've had 2 major wars in the last few years. There's just an abundance of capital flowing into specifically tech services. And so there's a lot of moving factors. And I think people are often very quick to associate headwinds in the knowledge economy as a result of, impacts of AI. And there's a lot of nuance. So that's macro, some of the things that we're paying attention to. And then, I think what we're really coaching a lot of our clients is, as much as you can focus around business outcomes, there's kind of 2 elements to this. Can you drive revenue for your clients? So are you helping them drive more revenue, or are you helping them reduce their costs over long periods of time? And if you can do those 2 things, you're going to be more resilient. The tools that you're implementing are going to be stickier than if you can't really clearly define business outcomes and kind of return on investment. So just, trying to stay very, very grounded. I think right now AI it's a great tool, but it sometimes can be a distraction. It can be, almost a toy instead of like a real impact to the business. And so just trying to stay grounded around that. There's some other nuances as well of, focusing on like specialized teams, having lots of domain expertise to be really a partner of your clients. So those are some of the things that we're tracking from a macro perspective, and then also, micro and tech services.
Yeah. And how do you, the SaaScopolis, what's that word?
Apocalypse.
Apocalypse of SaaS companies. So, obviously software as a service is sort of my belief, it's kind of a different industry than tech services,
Sure.
Tell us how you look at these 2 different worlds, and how you differentiate their the kind of the bear case and the bull case for both? Like, give us the SaaS story and your opinion on, for example, just use Salesforce. Like, are they dead?
It's good. It's a good question. I am not exactly, I don't spend as much time really deeply focused around the success of the enterprise software category, because I think a lot of our clients, they can be a partner of Salesforce, but then they can also implement other things, so they can pivot. And so I spend more time focused on services. So just, I'll make that caveat. I don't think Salesforce is dead. I think what you've had happen is the user experience is radically changing. The way that we interact with technology, the way that we can get access to information is radically changing. You still need to store massive amounts of data. And, Salesforce, at its core is a system of record. And there's a lot of value within that. And then I think you also look at Salesforce recently just made an acquisition of Contentful, which is a headless CMS tool. So, Salesforce, maybe their core products will face some headwinds, but they're a smart organization that's been very successful. And so they can pivot the organization. They can, buy and invest in AI. It could be an accelerant. Personally, I don't really believe there's some, rhetoric out in the market around, you can just vibe code a CRM platform. You can do it, but are there going to be bugs? Who's going to manage that solution when you have challenges with it and it doesn't have a specific feature? What do you do? So there's just a lot of other complications to a large enterprise piece of software. And then there's also just the entire cost equation. So, if I have to constantly keep building it myself, is that a good use of my time? And it's expensive. I'm going to have people spending time on that. And I'm going to take on a lot of risk that I potentially don't otherwise need to take on, even though, and I could just buy Salesforce and it's maybe slightly expensive, but it's just, there's an equation of cost and time. So I wouldn't say they're dead, but it's to be seen.
And then, so you kind of do the SaaS world. We all kind of know what that is. And then on the tech services side, try to give us the bear case. Like, these are the challenges in tech services. In other words, the picks and shovels of this, tech world, and then give us the bull case.
Within tech services, I think I'd mentioned this probably several times with your team, but there's some public rhetoric around, I forget who came out with this, but pointing to Jevons paradox, which is this concept of like, as you decrease the cost of a resource or a certain product or service, you sometimes can actually increase the total addressable market. And people are applying this to the knowledge economy. And I think we're actually seeing early signs of this within some of our clients. You can do a lot more with the same teams. That doesn't mean that the market for knowledge workers and tech services is actually decreasing. It's actually companies are just choosing to do more because they're in a competitive environment and they want to do more than their competition. So the output is a lot greater, whether that's, building new custom applications that they couldn't afford previously or replacing other legacy pieces of software and things like that. So I think that's, one thing that we're paying attention to. I think I would agree with that like paradox. And I think we're seeing early signs of that. I think we're also paying attention to, I think there's a lot of pressure on the legacy and or existing business models today. There is work that will compress building, software in the way that we used to 5 years ago, 3 years ago is radically changing. Engineers are not just manually building or writing lines of code. A lot of that is being done through agents and or AI tools. So I think a number of these businesses are going to have to really change what their service offering is and how they're engaging with clients. And then, clients and CIOs and CTOs also have to figure out the right ways to buy those services. At the end of the day, that there are a lot of tech services and the kind of knowledge economy and consulting firms. I like to think of it as they're in the business of managing kind of human capital and helping organizations go through these massive periods of change. AI is, one of the biggest pieces of change that we might experience in the last 10 to 20 years. And so it's going to be really hard to do that with the internal staff that you have. you're most likely going to leverage external parties to help you make the right decisions on the right tools, manage through cybersecurity risk, make sure that you can actually get back to a return on investment. There's going to be a lot of upfront investment. And so I think those are some of the things that make me bullish, but I think there will be pain in transitioning some of the business models from potentially just like a T&M business model to more fixed price, or focused on portions of a technology stack that are less relevant and are getting disrupted because of AI. So we're kind of keeping a close eye on all of those elements. I think the last thing I'll mention is, I think if you look at the two, software and services, or just product businesses, which I would capitalize or categorize the AI labs and AI tools as product. They're offering a product to the market. I think what the services market really offers, they're in full alignment with their customers in most cases. So they align with a tool, but they also have flexibility to not just push one tool, and they can find, hey, what is the right fit for your business? Whereas product businesses are very much, they're selling a product. And so they're going to, in most cases, tell you all of the amazing features as to why it works or should work. Whereas a service organization, they can kind of hedge some of their bets across different products. And so that's another reason why I think the services market, groups winners in that market, I think they can align really well with their customer base and say, hey, we're here to help you adopt some of these tools and products. There's a lot coming at you. Let's figure out the right ones, and then let's figure out how to actually implement them across your organization.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. And it is sort of the pick and shovel analogy or metaphor, in terms of, you've got so many people chasing the shiny gold or object on the product side. And that race is early innings, obviously. I mean, if you just look at AI, generally, you got OpenAI and Anthropic. I mean, who knows? There might be a third, a fourth, a fifth, sixth winner. We just don't know who yet is even competing, really, because it's been such a short amount of time. Garth, I was reading something, I think it was last week, but it was basically talking about Anthropic and OpenAI being like Coke and Pepsi, and that in the software world, the tech services space kind of grew up with it over a ratable 30, 40 years. And so the service ecosystem was maturing at a pace that was similar to software's installed base. And so therefore, software companies, by and large, chose to take their time and capital and invest it in product, and not giving services to the ultimate client. So that played out over a long period of time, and there was always this kind of indirect partnership between the product and the service ecosystem, and distinctly different. In this case, AI emerged so quickly. Say, what words you want to use, 3 to 5 years, let's say. I think that'd be generous. And that what we're seeing at Nimble Gravity, one of our portcos, is just the service ecosystem. It doesn't exist to the order of magnitude that the model or the product side of the business has exploded. And so therefore, there's just a massive race between OpenAI and Anthropic to get an installed base, which is very dependent upon the service ecosystem. How does that play out? I mean, do those big product language model platforms invest into services so that they can be the Coke or Pepsi winner, or do they continue to rely on third parties? And how does that all play out?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't have a good answer. I think I initially thought I had a good answer. And you were seeing early signs where both players were starting to invest in a services ecosystem. And then within the next 30 to 60 days, they raised a $4 billion JV and a $14 billion JV, or between the two. And so, and that was, with the intent of buying services firms to implement their tools more quickly. So I think, yeah, we're in this head to head. There's this head to head race between the two, and so I think they're kind of mirroring some of the actions that the other party takes. I think if you look at the software and the product businesses over the last 20 to 30 years, in most cases, it makes more sense to push things to a partner network. And the reason for that is just the businesses, they just fundamentally operate differently from a cash flow perspective. In a product business, you're dealing with a lot of upfront cost, and they consume a lot of cash for the R&D and development, and then you're spending a lot on sales and marketing, and you're also in the public markets viewed based on your gross margin. The gross margins of those two businesses are typically very different, and so it's dilutive for a software or product business in most cases to have a services arm inside the business. It's a drag on gross margin. They're also tracking revenue per head count, and so it's also a drag on some of those metrics. So I think over the long run, you will see it kind of remain the same, where it'll be implementation partners and services partners, and then you'll have the product business. Right now, I think we're in this accelerated race, and we've also seen, Salesforce did this, where they've acquired services firms in periods when they want really fast implementation, where they want to control the customer experience, where they want to control the implementation. And so I think that's
in the pace of that.
In the pace, yeah. So I think that's kind of where we're at right now. There's a backlog. They want to have control over it. These organizations are incredible at raising capital. And so they're doing what they're best at, is getting access to capital, raising capital, potentially dumping that into services firms. So I think we're in this unique point in time. I don't know that the long run will be a market that has the services organizations embedded within the product business.
Yeah, that does seem a bit far-fetched. Although in the short term, it's a little existential for these guys, because there's just not enough service capacity out there, which should be a bullish story for the tech services ecosystem generally. Just trying to keep up with that race should keep a lot of these companies very busy for a long time. And then you've got AI actually helping them, do more with less. And so therefore they can keep up now, maybe for the first time too. Yeah. Because they can expand capacity without necessarily adding more people, et cetera, et cetera. So, well, it's an exciting time. I'm sure you wake up every day and read the news and shake your head and wonder where all this is going to end up. But you're also kind of creating the future in many ways through your clients. You're providing many of your clients with access to capital, which maybe 5 years ago was a nice to have. And now all of a sudden it's a gotta have, because you're trying to keep up with the changing world at an accelerating pace. What kind of pressure does that put on you in terms of your clients, and what are you hearing from them in terms of why they're transacting now where maybe they didn't 2 years ago? Is this part of their psyche, is like, oh my gosh, I've either got to get bigger or better, or both, or risk, the status quo that they've spent so many years in sweat earning?
Yeah, I think we're definitely seeing that. I think there's a increase in activity right now, because I think whether it's fear-based or just bullish on the sector, but hey, I need to get bigger. I need access to capital. I need to do some M&A myself. I think the market is moving at a very fast clip, and so there's a ton of conversations happening. People are really trying to think from first principles, and where does this market go? How do I align myself with the winners? So yeah, I think there's a big increase in activity, and whether it's actual transactions or the pursuit of a transaction, there's a big uptick in the conversations that people are willing to have. And I think we're also coming out of a period that was not great for the services market in 23 and 24, when these tools were starting to accelerate. I think there was hesitation from a lot of enterprises to invest in certain areas of their IT stack, because they saw some of these tools coming. And so they were a little bit cautious on how many big projects and what their budgets looked like. I think we're starting to see that those budgets are thawing. They're making bets, because now they can actually see real returns. So you're kind of coming out of this period where performance wasn't great. Now performance is a lot better, and people are seeing that the market's starting to really accelerate. And so they don't want to miss out or fall behind.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hear from a lot of the folks that we meet on a direct basis versus through an intermediary. You kind of said it, but I want to underline it here, which is a lot of smaller companies have really smart founders and CEOs that run them. And they're sitting there going, well, why would I be bought and kind of cash out at this exciting time in the world when if I just raised some capital, I could be the hunter instead of the hunted. And they're looking at either expanding their service mix, like I do X, but I could do Y and Z, or they're saying, I'm in this geography. Boy, what if I merged or acquired my buddy who's, in a different geography? Or they're saying, I'm in the banking sector today. It would be cool if I could get into healthcare, or I could get into consumer products, or, keep going. And I just think it's really cool that there's a bunch of founders out there that are getting on their front foot and saying, I don't need to be bought. I can go do some really cool things with the platform I've built. And so we're getting brought into those conversations as a potential partner for them to effectuate that aggression. And I think it's just such a great time to be a founder right now. You got so many choices.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree.
Well, let's talk about the client for a moment here. I suppose just given where you play, and by the way, what revenue ranges is kind of ideal for Envoy? Like, how would you define the size of businesses that you typically would provide your expertise and services to?
Yeah, it's a great question. It depends on what part of the market that they play. If they're like reselling a bunch of licenses, those businesses may be larger because from a margin perspective, they're lower margins. In most cases, if it's heavily services, it's probably less than 100 million of revenue. In a lot of cases, typically north of 100 million, they've taken institutional capital and they've raised capital, and so it's just the conversation's a little bit different. But we have some clients that are also in that space as well. But for the most part, we spend a lot of time with businesses that are under 100 million.
And when you're brought in, I'm guessing in the early phases of that engagement, there's some education that's happening. I imagine, some founders are maybe really focused on revenue growth, maybe not as focused on, EBITDA or EBITDA growth. And then maybe to varying degrees, helping them understand what drives like the multiple. I would guess might be a little bit of an abstraction early. Tell us how you go through the process of enlightening that founder about EBITDA and exit multiple and what drives a great outcome for them. Like what is that conversation like, and how long does that take, and how do you do that artfully, Garth, without being patronizing, but being helpful? I mean, how does that all work for you in those early, say, weeks or months of an engagement?
Yeah, it's again great question. Most of our relationships, we are building a relationship over potentially 2 to 5 years prior to an actual transaction and or entering into a process to raise capital, bring on an institutional investor, or talk to strategics. So in a lot of cases, we're doing that. We're having those conversations. It's multiple conversations. It's not just one. And we do offer like a kind of a product that we call a strategic market assessment for a lot of founders, where we can benchmark them. We can walk through value drivers within a transaction, and we can help work with them over a 12 to 24 month period to focus time and attention on the right areas of the business, whether it's gross margin. If they have one service line that's less attractive, we can help focus their time and attention on another service line that's more attractive. And if it's a business that does some like AI, but they also do something else, we can say, hey, really focus on this. You want to show revenue growth, not just across the entire business, but on this area. So we'll try to align and set solid expectations at the beginning of the process through a strategic market assessment, or through a couple of different conversations once we get to know the business a little bit better. And then at the once we actually start a process, so once we start to actually plan and prep to raise capital, bring on an institutional investor, or sell to a strategic, we're also, we're basically taking that playbook and the value drivers, and we're keeping everyone really focused on that. And then we're trying to pull out all of those key themes and investment highlights within our marketing materials to hopefully get them the best price that they possibly can.
I mean, it's such a subtle point you're making here, but I think about even where I sit on the private equity side, and we own companies, right? We typically will hire a banker a year or two, before we want to transact, because it's just such a source of truth. Like when you have a whole boardroom of people, in our case, there are different biases and different life experiences that might encourage those people at the table to pound their fist on the table about X, and then somebody else might be talking about Y. And, we're sitting there at that table wondering, okay, well, who's right? And oftentimes they're both right, but it's to what extent. And, as you're preparing for an exit, if you have someone like you at the table, you don't have any political agendas. You're kind of blind to history in some cases, and in that respect, more open-minded. You know exactly the answer to the test because you just marketed a business just like it, like 6 months ago. And so you don't even have to pound your fist on the table. You say, hey, folks, if you want the best outcome for yourself and for your people, these are the 5 things that you need to focus on over the next year or two, and let's get after it. I mean, that is so powerful. And I'm surprised more entrepreneurs don't use the investment banking world to help them with that kind of organizational planning. I don't get it.
Yeah. No, I think I think we're seeing a little bit more of that as I think the markets are getting a little bit more mature. I think the tech services and knowledge economy has been a more attractive market to a lot of investors in the past 5 years because the market's performed well, and there's there's thousands of companies that operate within that area. So I think a number of founders, you see this within software, they get smarter with some of these conversations, and so they kind of realize the value in advisors like ourselves. But yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we actually have a couple of case studies where we did this and helped groups double the enterprise value of the business within like an 18-month period, because we helped sit down with the board or the management team and focus on the right areas.
Well, and that just begs the question. I mean, your comment to your parents when they ask you what you do and you say, it's sort of like being a real estate agent. I mean, I get it, but it is so much more about the strategy and the people than about the transaction, as you put it at the beginning of our conversation. And I think that's one of the things that makes Envoy and you so unique is having grown up at that kitchen table with your parents talking about the business gives you this, I'll give you a compliment. Like, your presence is just really soothing. It's not like and it's not arrogant. It's not Wall Street talk. It's not MBA talk. It's kitchen table business talk. And there's a certain feeling that we get when we work with you, Garth, that I'm guessing is really powerful with your clients. And then when you combine it with how active you are in these markets and how specific you are in terms of your industry focus and bringing those big worldly ideas to kind of the main street, the kitchen table kind of spirit, it's just really powerful. It's inspiring work. Tell me how often you feel that way in your job, and how engaged is your team in providing that feeling to your clients?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Those are some kind words. I appreciate all of that. I think so much of our team embodies kind of the same mentality, and I think it comes back to we have like a lot of like non-traditional backgrounds that I think most of us didn't expect to be in, doing what we're doing. And so I think just, top to bottom across our organization, I think we have a lot of people that really deeply care about our clients, care about just the experiences that they're creating for our clients and like what it's worth. We try to just be good people and get the best outcomes that we possibly can, but like also really think about the experience that this is such a transformational transaction. Like you can talk to someone that sold their business 5 to 10 years after they sell their business, and they can walk you through like every detail of the strategic meetings they had and the investors, and do you remember that party? And so it's just I think constantly trying to stay grounded, and like it's such a big meaningful moment for so many different people. But I think it's helpful that we've got a bunch of people that come from didn't have a ton of opportunities and were humbled at different parts of their life and come from very humble beginnings. We have a lot of staff that are international as well, so just like a very diverse culture of people, and I think it helps all of us stay super grounded and working with clients.
That's really well said. So yeah, so we're kind of at the end of our hour. Maybe talk to me, maybe share a story about a client that you're particularly proud of that gives you that fulsome emotional connection in terms of like you're almost like a proud part of the team, that empowered this outcome. And then maybe talk about one of your team members that you're that kind of personifies the essence of what you've built at Envoy. Maybe a client and a team member, if that's okay.
Yeah, happy to do it. I'll walk through the client and then we'll go through a team member. But if I forget, remind me. So a client, I would actually go back a few years. It was an early deal that I worked on. It was in the like commerce space, and we ended up selling the business to a large strategic. But there was a ton of interest in the business. And this was kind of through COVID. It was like coming out of COVID, and so the markets were we weren't really sure what was going to happen, and we ended up having some conversations. Obviously, as we all know, the markets like really took off in the back half of 2020. And through the process, again, had a bunch of interest in the business, public strategics, institutional investors, pretty much every profile of buyer expressed interest. And, not that economics are everything, but got an amazing outcome for the team and founders of the business that was way more than they ever thought they would get. I wasn't leading the transaction, but was on the deal team. And, coming out of that, it was kind of like my first aha moment of just like we far exceeded expectations. Everything worked out. It ended up being just an amazing transaction. And the founders, came away from that and they're like, I can pay for my kids to go to college. I can, buy my kids houses and things like that. Like it was just like this transformational thing that they never expected. And I think they were really humble through that period and super, super thankful for all of the work. And this was after, going through tons and tons of late night calls and, stressful situations. And so I think that was just a incredibly rewarding situation to go through and to work with people that were humble, thankful, but then also like sharing how transformational the transaction was, and just kind of like beyond their wildest imagination. So I think I would point to that. And then in terms of staff, I mean, we've got some amazing staff, so it's hard to point to just one, but I think, a couple of our internal team members, I think this was at our offsite in the fall, just hearing them talk about like what working at our organization means to them. And you're like, oh, you've articulated like our culture and our value prop better than I ever would. Like you elaborated on things that I didn't even think about. And so I think hearing internal staff, when you have invested a lot in people and you have invested a lot in culture, hearing them advocate on the business's behalf is like the most rewarding thing you can do. And so I think it was, the offsite, and then also just like in our recruiting processes with other people, where it's like they're now the salesman or the spokesperson for the organization, and you're like, oh, I'm just along for the ride. I'm just here to listen and enjoy. And so I think, so I don't know if it's this dynamic of internally where people are pushing and you're not like pulling, but people are actually pushing you a little bit. I think that's been a super rewarding experience.
Yeah, and hopefully just the beginning of that. I mean, you might argue that after these many years, you're producing your own kinetic energy. It's kind of the flywheel effect where, you hire great people and do good work, and then those people and that good work leads you as a leader, right? Like it's actually like producing its own energy. I can feel that here some days. Some days I don't. but more days than in 25 I feel that way, and probably felt more that way than in 24. And listen, Garth, congratulations. It's been awesome to get to know you and to welcome you here in Denver and give you an opportunity to meet more of our team and give them all an opportunity to get to know Garth and learn from you as we did this morning. It's just been such a pleasure and privilege to be able to get to know you and your firm. So congratulations and thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was great.